Value. What do we mean by value? And for those of you who would be expecting an Oxford Dictionary explanation, sorry, I'm way too practical for that. I've got my own example. My wife and I sometimes go to these buffet restaurants where you have like a gazillion dishes, and then despite all my best intentions, I really blow myself up and go all out just on the starters and the main courses. And then a couple of minutes later, I'd walk through the corner and I'd see that on display. So, do I ignore it and do I stop? Of course not. Do any of you? Please don't make me the only one that does this. Of course, I go in and I devour a couple of those desserts on display. Why? Because they're there, and I've paid for them. And not having some of them would mean I didn't get all the value that I could for the investment that I've made. So hopefully I'm not the only one. I truly believe that all of us want really good value for money when we make any kind of an investment. What does value mean in the context of AppDynamics? Slightly different question. Firstly, no shelfware. I mean, everybody hates shelfware. That really is just a waste of money. So it's about making sure that we deploy everything that we've purchased. Second point, everything that we've deployed is working as expected, and it is providing us with valuable information in a way that we can consume and make use of. So this always makes me think back to the old question about what's the difference between data and information. Hands up. Anybody knows what's the difference between data and information? No one? Really? Oh, great. Thank you. Free beers for you tonight. Of course, data is just that. It's data. Information is data that has context and purpose and is useful to somebody in some context. And really what we want from our deployment is valuable information, not just data. So we need to make sure that what we've deployed is working as expected. And then finally, we need to know what we have. We need to know the capabilities, what we can do with it. We need to be able to change it or extend it as we go forwards. So once you've accomplished that with your deployment, you should get good value. Sounds great, right? So how do we achieve this? One of the most important ways of doing this is by deploying a CoE. Well, hands up. Anybody knows what CoE stands for? I think trick question. Yeah, thank you very much. That's easy. Who actually has a CoE for any kind of a purpose? Hands up. One back there, one there. Great. Okay, not that many, so at least I'm not wasting my time. I might have been preaching to the converteds. CoE, Center of Excellence, is really just a team that provides leadership, best practice, support, and or training in a specific focus area, and in this case, it is AppDynamics as a focus area. All right, Center of Excellence. What would a Center of Excellence do? So the objectives would be to become self-sufficient in the deployment, configuration, maintenance, and use of AppDynamics. It is making sure that we don't constantly need external input and help to get things done in our organization. Then, of course, also making sure that what we've deployed is fit for purpose, it's correct, it's consistent, it is maintaining standards, and it really is coming back to delivering information rather than just data. And then finally, and to me, this really is the crux of the matter. It's about getting everything so ingrained into the DNA of the organization that it becomes second nature in the sense that it becomes AppDynamics as a service, essentially. If you can get to a point where deploying AppDynamics into a new application is something you can just order off a service catalog and it sort of just gets done in the same way that you'd order a new VM for your application cluster, that's really the place we want to be at. And since we're getting close to Wimbledon season, I thought I'd explain this along with a bit of sporting interest. Anybody here play tennis? A few? Great. Anybody watches tennis? Likes tennis? Great. Yeah. I'm a keen tennis player myself, or at least I used to be until my joints gave in. And the analogy is when you start playing tennis, you really have to focus on every single shot just to try and get it in the court instead of going in the net or even over the fence. But then after a while, you get to a point where getting it in the court is easy. You don't really have to think about it anymore. Then you get to a point where your thoughts are more value add, strategic thoughts. Where do I actually hit the ball to win the point, rather than just how to get it in court? And that's a similar situation we want to get to with AppDynamics. Getting it deployed and working in an application shouldn't be an issue. It should just be something that just happens when you order it off the service catalog. That really opens up an opportunity to really get into the value adds. The real value add for AppDynamics is not just APM, alerting, troubleshooting. There's a lot more in there. You really have a gold mine that you can extract value from when you have AppDynamics in your organization. A lot of business value, business information that you can extract. And that's where we want to get people to. Not have to worry about, if I deploy this agent, is it going to work? That should just happen. It should just work. And that's what the CoE is there for. It's about getting everything in place, building all the enablers, making people, educating people to a point where that just becomes second nature, like with tennis, just getting the ball in the court. You don't think about it anymore, it just happens. So AppDynamics as a service, that really is the end objective of a center of excellence. And given that we're in a world where everything has an acronym, I thought, okay, cool, we have to find an acronym for this. So I created an acronym. Oh, sorry, okay, yes. I also realized that doesn't really work. So let's rather talk about ADAS, AD as a service. So that's our ultimate objective. Benefits of the CoE in a bit more detail. A while back, I traveled to a customer in mainland Europe, and I got to the application team, and they were super excited and very keen, and they really were loving what they were doing. And then I looked at the configuration of the system, and it was just completely wrong. Absolutely no proper value coming out of it at all, because the way that they've modeled things were just completely in the wrong way. And probably just because nobody ever really told them or taught them the right way to do it. That's not the point, though. Every tool, every system has some things that has to be done in a certain way. That's just the way the tool was built, and that's the way you have to configure it to really open up the capabilities of the system, and AppDynamics is no different. There are just some things that you have to do in a certain way to get the right level of value. So it's all about making sure people have best practices, know how to do things in the right way, to really unlock the potential in the system. And then baking those into standard processes, and also through introducing other standards, a CoE can really drive quality, making sure that we ultimately deliver information rather than just data. And then also the whole concept of AD as a service means you can really deploy your investment very quickly. Not end up with shelfware, and that really drives the adoption part, so you can get things out there quicker and really unlock the value of the system. Now, of course, doing things quicker, more efficient, baking it into standard processes reduces your total cost of ownership. You do it right first time, you don't have to come back and rework it. All of that drives down cost. And then at the same time driving down cost, whilst also unlocking the real gold that you have in the mine beneath you, the added value. That really gives you a much bigger return on investment. And in layman's terms, what does that mean? Maximum value, like having the starters, main courses, and desserts. An example. So this specific case is a large multinational organization in the financial sector. Their journey with AppDynamics started in January 2016. There was a services engagement where over a period of 6 months we helped them get some of the foundations in place, and we also helped them instrument 5 rather complex applications, business applications in their environment. At that point, the services engagement stopped, but that's also the point where their CoE kicked in. Now, fast forward 18 months, end of December, they had 335 business applications deployed, And that's a growth of course, 330 or about 18 per month, which is really not insignificant. And their target for the end of the year is 650, another acceleration and a step up to 26 applications per month. All of that with consistent quality standards, the standards throughout deployment, really driving value excuse me, from their investment. I'm going to give you a very quick tour through some of the aspects involved in setting up a center of excellence. The key elements, it's all about, it's almost a cliche, but you have to involve people, process, and technology. People is all about identifying the right resources to fulfill the different roles, to perform the functions that you need in the CoE, and I'll give a bit more information about that in subsequent slides. Now, it might sound easier than it actually is. In something as strategic as a CoE, it is not just about finding the first person who doesn't have a full plate. You actually have to think about what you're trying to achieve in the CoE and then finding the right people for those right roles. Process, it's all about establishing some processes for how the CoE engages with the rest of the organization and vice versa, how the organization requests services and support from the CoE. But it's also about hooking in and using some of the existing organizational processes. Again, I'll touch on that later on, but it's a good example of this is change. You need to hook into change processes to make sure that monitoring always keeps pace with change that's constantly going on. And then there's always an aspect of technology and tools that you can use to support the functioning of the Center of Excellence, and you need to identify what tools would be useful. You'd configure them and populate them with the right levels of information. And then finally, maybe not that intuitively, there's a fourth aspect, and that is community. It is a very, very important part of a CoE, and it's strictly not, the community is not in the CoE, but building the communities is an absolute core function of the CoE. Even in large organizations, the CoE tend to be a fairly small team. They really cannot reach and do everything themselves. Again, they're an enabler, they're the spark that gets things going, but they can't do it all themselves. And again, a good analogy is your boiler at home. The CoE is like that pilot flame. It's always there, it's always burning, it's always doing its thing, but it really is the main burner that ignites, that really gets things done, that really moves you forward, really heats your water. And the community is that main burner in your boiler. The CoE cannot do it all by themselves. So a lot of the focus of the CoE is also around community building. If we look at the people side, typically there are 5 different functions and some required roles to actually fulfill those functions. First one in the middle, ownership and evangelism. The CoE is a team, they need a leader, so you need a service owner that can manage that service. It's around resources, budgets, requirements, but they also need to be a strong evangelist about the tool and its use in the organization. Next up, we have platform admin. Of course, with on-premise deployments, this is a much bigger function and role than it is for SaaS, but even with SaaS deployments, there are some on-premise components, and you always have aspects of controller management, licensing, application keys, security setup, and integrations that have to be done and maintained. So there's always an aspect of platform admin that needs to be done. Then the consulting function performed by subject matter experts, we also call them specialists sometimes. That's the function that goes out and works with the rest of the organization to help them unlock the potential of AppDynamics or to resolve problems and issues. Training is a very, very big part of the Center of Excellence. It is about enabling the whole organization to understand what they have. And a very good model there is to use the train the trainer function or option that we present in our university, where you train up somebody in the customer organization and then they can train support teams, business teams, application teams, all kinds of users in the organization, and even new resources that onboard into the Center of Excellence itself. They also need training. Finally, governance obviously is an area for a project manager. But to be honest, in a center of excellence, governance is not just the purview of the project manager. It is really for the whole team, and more specifically the subject matter experts that consult with the rest of the organization, and also the service owner. And it's about ensuring adherence to standards, maintaining quality and consistency in the deployments. The PM is more around just tracking tasks, activities, unblocking issues, etc. But governance for the way that the tool is used is really a function of the whole team. There are also some optional roles that could be used in very big organizations. Perhaps on the platform admin side, you'd have somebody who specializes in packaging or integration with other systems. And on the consulting side, you might also involve an architect or what we call champions. And I'll talk about champions a little bit later on, again, give you more information. On the process side, so we've talked about people very briefly. Process side, what are some of the typical processes that a CoE would set up or hook into? Obvious one, first one, new application onboarding. You want to add monitoring to an application. How does that get done in the context of the wider organization? Changes. We all know that the only constant in life is change. Nothing is ever static for very long at all. Monitoring has to keep pace with change, else it just becomes outdated and useless. What types of changes, you might ask? Functional changes. Applications get new functionality added. There might be new transactions to track. They might be very important to the business, so we need to get them onto dashboards. That's a change that would have to be made. But if nobody thought about the monitoring when the new application was deployed, that might just fall through the cracks. Or non-functional changes. New nodes are added to an application cluster. An agent needs to be deployed. Again, standing up new nodes in today's times is a fairly easy thing to do. Put in an order into a service catalog, you have some VMs, they get pointed into the right cluster, and off you go. But again, somebody just needs to think, oh, okay, those nodes also need to report into that application, and if we don't add an agent to them, we're going to miss a lot of information and traffic from them. So we need to hook into the organization's change processes and at least make sure that if AppDynamics is your strategic monitoring tool, it needs to be considered, at least along with all the other things, for every change that goes through the different cycles. Requesting assistance or support from the Center of Excellence, how do people do that? How do you track and manage that and account for that? Configuration migration, how do you move your configuration and approve the moving of configuration through your different non-production environments, ultimately into production? What does that process look like? Role-based access control. How do people request access to the system? What level of access do they get? What can they see? What can they do? Who approves that access? Again, there's a process around that needs to hook into your organizational security policies and procedures. And these are just a few. There's quite a few more, and every organization has a few different esoteric ones. We have some templates internally in our organization for many of these, and if anybody's interested, talk to me afterwards and we can provide you more detail about those. Then also tools that could be used that we often see adding value to a center of excellence. Obviously, intranet or wiki site where information can be captured and published about what the whole initiative around AppDynamics is, what it does, how you can use it, what value it can give you. And it's also very helpful if that tool has discussion forum capability, because questions, answers builds up a very good knowledge base, frequently asked questions that people can search and always go back to. And of course, a good example of something like this that's commonly used is Confluence or any other type of wiki or intranet site. Request management ties back to the request process. How do people request new applications? How do they request to use some of the license pools and application key? And that might be as simple as sending an email to a team mailbox, or it could be raising a JIRA request in JIRA that's quite commonly used as well, and or anything in between. User management and entitlements, again, ties back to the RBAC process. What are the tools that support that, and how do they need to be set up and changed to support user management and role-based access control? Artifact repositories, in the lifetime of a CoE, there are many assets, artifacts that need to be stored somewhere, deployment packages, document templates, other documentation, tools, spreadsheets. You need some place to store them and link to them from the wiki. And then service catalog sort of builds from request management, but it takes it a step further, and it really, again, comes back to the whole concept of AppD as a service. Ultimately, you want to expose some of the functions or services that the CoE provides in a service catalog where they can be ordered, and in an ideal world, a lot of it could be automated and just have the right human approvals or interventions where necessary. Community. So I've already said that community is a very important part of AppDynamics' Center of Excellence. So what are the things we can do to build a community other than just forcing people to use it? That's not really a good way of building a community. The first stream is around information, and I should actually have said learning rather than training. It's information, learning, and socializing. What are some of the things that we've seen works in that space? Lunch and learn sessions or brown bag sessions where there are specific topics that might not be that well known about the capabilities of the solution and what it can provide for different teams during lunch sessions. I think that's a fairly well-known mechanism. Another one is what we call Ask the Expert calls. Some people call them AppDynamics clinics, where it's a scheduled open call, no specific agenda, but it's a recurring call. People can dial in and ask any question to a panel of AppD subject matter experts, which would typically be some of your Center of Excellence members. And these can range from anything like, what can the system do for me? How do I get it? How do I deploy it? To how do I get business value identified from transactions, or troubleshooting technical problems. And the last one that I've just highlighted in that category is for the Center of Excellence to either host or sponsor social events that could involve food, drink, where people can actually just socialize and talk about their experiences, discuss their success stories, discuss their problems, help each other out. Cross-pollination of ideas is a very powerful tool. The next track, and really hooks into that last point, is about sharing success stories. As I've just tried to explain, one of the best ways of doing this is word of mouth, getting people to talk to each other, to interact, to exchange information. Of course, going back to the wiki or an intranet page, very, very powerful tool where you can capture success stories. And what we found in the past as well is, even though word of mouth is good, but getting everything written down in a form of a wiki or intranet site makes it searchable, and people can quite easily find information that relates to their current scenario or problem. And then you can even go as far as using some desktop tickers where you engage with your IT organization to share a specific success story through pushing it out to everybody's corporate desktop where it might scroll across the screen. Many different ways of actually promoting what's happened with a solution. Implementation process, very high level. I'm not really going to spend too much time on this. Let's take the scenario of a new deployment. AppDynamics is being deployed for the first time. There will be an implementation project with some foundational activities, then leading into application configuration. When in that whole process should you think about implementing or starting the process of implementing a Center of Excellence? Any ideas? Any takers? Again, free beer online, back there. Foundation. Thank you very much, sir. You do earn your beer tonight. Yes, ideally you'd start the CoE track at the same time or only very, very shortly after you start your main deployment projects for two reasons. First one, if your project track is being done by AppDynamics Professional Services, and I don't mean to brag, but our people are quite experienced, they know what they're doing, and it's a very good learning opportunity for the Center of Excellence resources. So they would go through formal training and additional enablement potentially, but there's nothing like augmenting theoretical training with real hands-on experience with experienced people. And then secondly, the elapsed time for setting up a Center of Excellence is not insignificant. So we have found that on average, you're talking about 13 to 16 weeks to go through a proper CoE setup. Now, that is not continuous time. There are gaps in there while you wait for resources to be trained or for processes to be reviewed and approved within an organization. So there's a lot of moving parts in the implementation, but on average, we've found that it's that period of time. Of course, it can be less, and in some cases, it can even be more. But it's not insignificant. So you have to start it quite early if you want to get to a point where the CoE can take over the BAU functionality when the main deployment project finishes. In a bit more detail, time is running out, I'm going to skip through it. There's a definition phase, design workshop. You should produce a blueprint that defines the boundaries and the scope of the CoE in your specific organization. A build phase where we typically do things in parallel on the people track, process track, technology track, looking at the aspects that we've gone through, roles, training, community, processes, definitions, system identification and population, and then executing that, starting to run those processes, getting in the requests, and very importantly, getting some feedback and doing continuous improvement, improving processes, populating tools with more and better information, etc. Finally, I want to share with you a few tips and tricks or tales from the trenches. I've been involved in setting up Center of Excellences in some of the world's biggest banks, some of the world's biggest automotive manufacturers. So I've been working with this for a while, and I've seen a few things. Some of them work and some of them don't work. First thing, dedicated resources. Where possible, don't share resources across different tools. It dilutes the focus. So you get to a situation, it's not maybe that bad, but jack of all trades, master of none. If somebody has to split their attention across 2, 3, 4 different types of solutions, then it's not full value. In my opinion, it's better to have 3 people each sharing all the different hats for an AppDynamics CoE and 3 more for a different tool than having 6 people and all of them sharing all of the responsibilities across all the different tools. It just gives you better focus and better utilization. What's also worked very well with some of our customers in the past is making or adding the CoE activities and role allocation into resource personal development plans. And a key aspect that I've not really mentioned, and it ties into this, is that giving somebody a role in a CoE shouldn't just be something that's added onto their day job, that they get to whenever they've got some time left in the day. If you build a CoE, as we said, it really is a strategic initiative that has to make sure you have proper return on investment and value. You need to think about finding the right people and allocating the time to do the job that they should be doing. And that's extracting the gold from your mine. Strong leadership may be obvious, but again, in some cases, people would just take the first team lead or manager that doesn't have a full plate and make them the service owner of the Center of Excellence, and that might not be the right thing to do. You need strong leadership with strong management skills, of course, but also having that buy into the system, evangelizing the use of the tool, and spreading the word about what it can do for the organization. Champions. So I've talked about champions earlier. Again, in very, very large organizations, even if you build a community out there in the enterprise and you have your Center of Excellence down here, they get too far disconnected, or you struggle to really get the community out there into the far reaches of the organization. So we've seen the concept grow of champions. Now, a champion is it's almost like a proxy to the Center of Excellence. It's a person that's also trained up and they understand what it's about and how the CoE works. They might not be at exactly the same level of the CoE, but they're certainly no slouch either. But they work in a specific segment of the business or a sector or a geographical region. And they can push the adoption and use within that sector or that region. And they're much closer to the people in that area. And they can drive adoption, they can answer questions, they can help out, and only refer back to the Center of Excellence when it's really complex or need more assistance. And again, this really helps drive adoption and glues everything together from the core CoE to the wider community. Then we talked about community, and I sort of hinted at that in the previous slide. When you have community events, please, please, please try and do them in person. Today's age, we do a lot virtually, WebEx, Skype meetings, etc. It is not the same as getting people together in a room and having them talk about things where you can see people's excitement, hear about it, and mingle and talk. And where you can, I'll share a trade secret with you. Catalysts. Anybody know what a catalyst is? I did that in science in school. And a catalyst? Yeah, quite a few. Great. I have actually invented a new catalyst to drive that social activity, and it's called beer, wine, and pizza. So whenever you have a community event, provide some beer, wine, pizza, provided you have the resources. That really does stimulate conversation. It acts as a great catalyst. So use that wisely. Continuous improvement, talked about that. The center of excellence cannot be a static place. It's not something you set up once and then everybody can sit back and relax because now everything's on a good track. There's continuous improvement to processes, tools, even as applications change and monitoring needs to change, the whole environment, the whole enterprise changes, and everything the CoE does needs to change to keep fitting in with the way the rest of the organization works. So continuous improvement is essential. Don't create your center of excellence in just one area or one silo of the business. I've seen a case where this was done, and unfortunately, it's a fact of life. There are silos in organizations, and communication and cooperation across silos is not always that great, and it can be a real barrier to growth and adoption across the wider organization. So please try and keep your center of excellence neutral. Make it the Switzerland of your organization. They should not be tied to any specific sector or line of business or region, as far as possible, to make sure that you can spread the love across the whole organization. Almost at the end, training the enterprise or enabling them. Training as a function should not just be done on demand, not just when an application wants to adopt monitoring and they want training done. It should be an active push out from the center of excellence into the organization, and that's where the community and the lunch and learn comes in as well. Go out, tell people about what the system can do, the advanced capabilities beyond just troubleshooting and fault finding, and ensure that everybody knows and can then help you drive towards getting the additional value. Be clear on what the purpose and scope of the center of excellence is. That sometimes it's for a wider incident management capability, or sometimes it's just for application performance managing. Just be clear on which one you're going for so that everybody knows what you're doing. And then finally, center of excellence is an enabler. It's not it's a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. So it's like a good process. It should support whatever activity it supports, but it should almost be an invisible part in the background. It helps everything happening, but it shouldn't get in the way. It shouldn't be a hindrance. So please keep that in mind. A good balancing act between standards, processes, but don't make it too hard for people to adopt. I was going to go back and go through, I hope you would have seen how a center of excellence would actually help you to get everything fully deployed as a service, working as expected with standards and consistency, quality, and the training aspect and community would drive into knowing what the solution does, how it works, how to extend it, and that would, as we've said at the start, really drive value from your investment.